Everyone has a story. Where have you come from? Why are you here? Where are you going? These questions lie at the heart of what it means to be human. And when we pause and listen carefully, we find that the answers can have profound implications on all of our lives. Welcome. This is True Stories.
Well, I was born in Flagstaff, Arizona, and I'm half Mexican. So my dad grew up in a very traditional Mexican home. So he raised me to grow up in the Catholic Church. So I remember going to catechism and taking my confirmation, and from a really young age I felt like God was more of this like rule keeper, this guy in the sky who was just tracking when I was doing bad things. And so from a really early age I just always thought that God was that way, very unrelational. And so I also grew up in a home where I had a parent that is a functioning alcoholic. And so when my parents decided to move to Tucson, Arizona, I had a really hard time with that. I felt really alone. I always had this message that in my head, this thing that was always recording that I wasn't ever good enough, I am unloved and unworthy. And so having that, not getting along with my parents, that was a really difficult time as far as growing up. And so I felt like I must have done something wrong, so these are the consequences. God is mad at me. I remember being in high school, I was a part of a group called Young Life, and so for the first time I actually kind of heard a little bit about Jesus. And so that summer I went to a Young Life camp, and for the very first time in my life I actually heard the good news. I heard the gospel. I had heard that God wanted to have a relationship with me, and that God loved me enough to send his son to die for me. And the struggles that I had as far as God's grace and God's love, I wanted so desperately to be a part of that. I wanted to be invited and loved and accepted, because I didn't really feel accepted too much in my home. In college, I had actually met my first real serious boyfriend, and that relationship had actually taken me to Florida. And so I moved to Florida with this person, and it was really difficult as far as I was in an emotionally abusive relationship for 5 years and was cheated on and taken advantage of financially. And so the second big turning point in my life was just that when that relationship ended, it was the most devastating thing that had ever happened to me, and it was the most painful thing that I had ever really experienced. And so I just remember I thought that I would die just of a broken heart, and then I didn't. And I just told God I knew I wasn't meant to be who God created me to be by being with that person, but I was just so devastated by that relationship ending, and I needed God, and I just was like, Lord, I can't get through this if you don't help me out. And so God was so good and so gracious. He was able to get me to come back to Arizona. So I had a support system here in Arizona, and I had a job opportunity to work for a really amazing company. So I remember praying and just saying, Lord, like I really need healing, and I need community. And so I had some friends that lived in Tucson that were here in Phoenix that invited me to the spring. And so I initially went to the spring in Tempe, and that was a really fruitful time for me because I was in a lot of deep need of healing. And it was really great to see physically and from my experience a community surround me and just see God's grace and love over again. I started with Spring Midtown, and I just loved it. I loved it there. I loved the community, and again, wanting to, serve and help, I was able to be a part of the leadership here at the Spring Midtown and work with really awesome people and continue to work in our community. I feel like God has given me a second chance and a confidence to be able to just talk to people and share my story. And so I try to minister to people at work and give them the same message that I received, ultimately that they're loved and that they are valued and that they are worthy. And so in the future, I don't know what that looks like, but overseeing kids ministry right now for Spring Midtown, it's been a very challenging thing, but I also want it to be a very functional thing. So at any age, just having a child hear about the good news, it doesn't have to be in high school, it doesn't have to be in college, but just that I have a really unique opportunity to share that truth. My story is just continuing to be that speaker of truth in people's lives, and just working with family and friends that struggle with emotional abuse, are in emotionally abusive relationships, that have strongholds of addiction. And so just trying to figure out what that looks like as far as loving those people and bringing truth into their life and bringing Christ into their life.